All right, today I want to go over the texturing part of your products. If you get your products done, then you can start doing the texture. There's a lot of mixing as to the exact order of how things are laid out, exact order of how you do these things, especially after you have the model. There are several different ways we can go, and so we'll explore one of those ways today. So the idea here is that we have these products that we built. We need to get images on them so that they look more like products. So I have a couple items here. This is a peanut jar. This is a label. So typically the model, imagine the label's not on here, that's something that we would typically have, just a gray image of what this thing would look like. We want to get this graphic on top of here, and that's what we're going to cover today. Now the issue that we have is this is a 3D object, and we have a 2D image that has to wrap on the 3D item. The software doesn't know where we want to put this. It has no idea what a label is. It doesn't know that we would put it on the front of it versus the bottom versus the top versus around the band or any of that. So one of the processes we'll do is called UV wrapping, which is taking our 3D item and stripping it down to a flat item. Okay, so basically we're going to take this item that is 3D and we're going to cut it up in a separate part of the software and make a flattened out version of it. Okay? Now, this one is a bit more complex. Let's skip over to the more simple one. Let's say that we have something like this. If I have this item that I modeled in 3D and I needed to flatten this out, what would you typically do? No, just in the real world. Well, if we squish it, then we lose that side, right? Unfold it, right? So that's exactly how they built this. If I rip that piece here, rip that piece there, rip this here, and rip that there, and then I do that, we basically have a flattened out version of that 3D item. Okay, that's essentially what we have to do inside the software. It's called unwrapping, where we take a 3D item and then we flatten it out to make it look flat so that we can put our textures here. Now we are going to basically create this flattened out version. It'll look like a wireframe. Imagine nothing is on here, just a wireframe. And then we'll put the graphics in those spots where all of these pieces are, and then the software will then know, okay, you took this face and you flattened it like this. That's where that texture is going to go. This one's going to be here, this one's going to be there, and so on. This one obviously is a bit more complex because of the shape of it. But if we focus on the main area of where the label is, it's actually not much different, right? So the label for this one is just on the side, goes to the front, and then goes around. So if I'm going to make this label only in 3D, flattened out, what would I do in the real world? Right, just cut it and then like lay these pieces down, okay? Now there's also a spot on the back where it says Best Buy, blah, blah, blah. Good, they weren't expired. So that's another area that we would have to have laid out. Everything in 3D that we do with textures has to have the UVs laid out. It doesn't work unless we do that step. These are a couple examples, not that, this. A couple examples of different things that have had their UVs laid out. If you have a character, this full-blown character has to have a flattened out version of it in order to get the textures to make sense. So they can't make the jeans look like jeans unless they've taken the jeans, which are here, and cut them and flatten them out. So a lot of times I find it helps to actually look at other UVs to see how somebody else has cut up or laid them out, because it makes more sense. Here's a hand. You can see that the hand is basically just like cut along the side here, opened up, and then flattened out. Oops, I didn't mean to click the video. I just wanted to click that. There we go. Here's another one you can see. Here is another one. Look at the head. Even the head is one piece is flattened out. If you cut it in certain spots, you can flatten these out somewhat. Now, one of the things that we will encounter the further you get into 3D, this assignment we shouldn't have too much of it, but the further you get into 3D is called UV stretching, okay? Or UV distortion, where some of these pieces in the software it's here, and it looks like it's flat, but it's actually like distorted inside there. If I go and look at this image and we zoom in on it, you'll see that the divisions here are nice and smooth. They are very much representative of the divisions that are here. So if there's like a big block right here on his chest, and I come over to this side and I find out where his chest is, probably down here, I'll be able to find that same big block area, and those proportions will match up. The blocks in the UV won't be stretched out vertically, and then the ones in the model are stretched like this or squished. Whatever the UVs look like, or whatever the model looks like here, the UV should be very representative of that, okay? Here's one for a building. And again, you'll see the pieces are just laid out. When you get into something that's more complex, sometimes you will have more pieces, okay? When I looked at the person, there was what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 pieces here for this person. For this building, which is right there, there were way over 10 pieces, especially with all of these types of things here. So sometimes we will have more pieces, sometimes we will have less pieces. The idea here is to make them as optimized as possible, okay? So let's jump into the software and we'll start playing with the UV layout. I like to just grab all of my items and group them first, and I'm going to make a material. Now, we need to figure out what materials look like or what the UVs currently look like so that we can tweak them and test it out. And the best way to do that is to put a checkerboard on your stuff, okay? So if I just go into my material, and not there, and create a checkerboard under surfaces, under checkerboard, and then add a bunch of frequency here, like 10 and 10. Now when I drop this onto my null, now I can see what the texture would actually look like, okay? Let me just grab one of my items here. I don't want that one. Maybe I want this one. Let's see what that one is. That's the big one. I'll take that one to start. Oops. So I'm just going to hide all the other ones. And here's a shortcut. You can hide stuff by going into the red here. So the top one is display, the bottom one is render. If you hold shift, you can only click it once and it'll automatically jump to the red. It like knows what you want. All right, so there's just that one item here. Oops, there's still another item because I didn't hide that one. There we go. Cool. All right, so there's our checkerboard. We can see in some of these areas we have squished squares here. On the cap, there's some squished squares. Here we have some stretched out squares. So what that tells me is that those are not consistent. On my checkerboard, if I did it correctly, let me take this down to a smaller number just so we can verify it. Are these squares or are these rectangles? Squares, right? Every white and black square is a square, perfectly sized width and height. So that means that when I look at my shape here, I should see the same thing. Perfectly square things. I currently don't see any here. If I switch to the side, maybe that one and that one are, okay? The rest are just jacked up. Typically, you will find everything in your scene is going to be crazy, not laid out correctly, all right? So what we need to do is go into the model and start tweaking it. Now, before I jump into it and start tweaking it, I need to commit some of these things to the actual model. So if I were to, this bottom piece here has been subdivided, okay? So it's been smoothed out. If I turn that off, look what happens to the UVs. Okay, so that will affect the UVs on this. Now what that means for us is that when I go into my UVs, let's say I laid it out, I took my item and I put it like this, perfect UVs, and then I put a smooth on it, they get jacked up again, okay? So I want to make sure that whenever I do my UV layout, that it's on the smoothest version of this thing as possible. Now we will run into an issue when I do that though. If I go like this, and let me go to my attributes here, And I'm going to put this up to 3 because that's actually what it's going to look like. That's a lot of divisions for me to have to select in order for me to lay out the UVs. Because I have to basically grab all those faces and do different things, different operations to the faces to break them apart. So typically what I will do is I will do a UV layout on the lower resolution version, then smooth it, and then refine it. And typically that's an easier workflow than trying to go through and select all those faces, okay? So my final version will be this, but I'm going to work on this first, fix it, and then move on to the next step. All right, so in the layout area, I'm going to go to BP UV Edit. Now this is where all the magic happens, all the magic of frustrating using UVs. People do not like doing UV layout. Some people do, but it's very few people that do like it. This is a job at companies. People that model typically will pass off their models to someone else, and they'll do all the UV layout for characters, buildings. Think of transformers. Every single component on a transformer has to go through this process of modeling it, UV layout, and then texturing it. So all these things are basically left up to individual people to do each one of those steps. All right, so let's focus on one thing at a time. So I'm going to go to the cap first. So here's the cap. My cap is a sweep. I can't lay out the UVs on a sweep because that's not a locked-in object yet, okay? Same thing with the subdivision. I couldn't lay it out on the subdivision until I commit those changes. So I'm going to go to my sweep and hit C, and now I actually have the sweep, and then I have these two caps. And let me see what the cap is. That's this. Oh, that's the part that's on the inside. I don't need that. And that's this, which is the other part of the inside, which I don't need. I'm missing a part here. Bottle. Oh, there it is. Cap is way up here. There we go. Same thing here. This is the sweep for that. I'll just hit C on that. That's the inner part that the threads as it's twisting on. That's what that sweep is. So I can label that threads. I don't get confused. And then this is the actual cap. Okay. So I'm going to focus on just the cap. So for now, I'm just going to hide the bottle so I don't see it. And this is what the end model will look like, so I can just lay this out. Make sure all my stuff is right. Okay. So up here at the top, this is where we select different things. So we have a thing called UV polygons. Those are different than faces, okay? Even though they're essentially the same thing, if I click on this face here, that icon looks a lot similar to that one, but it's selecting two different things. One's selecting the flattened out version of this thing, one's selecting the 3D model. Initially it's going to look the same, but just know they're different, okay? So if I click on that, it allows me to select faces. And again, these are all 3D faces, but I'm not moving any 3D model. I'm actually moving the texture around on those pieces, okay? I'm in the Move tool. I can click on a piece, click and drag, and it'll move the texture space. This on the right is what the texture currently looks like. This is the flattened out version. That looks nothing like anything I can work with, okay? So the process for this is not incredibly difficult as long as you keep it simple. So I need to break this up into individual pieces. Basically anywhere there's a direction change, that's where I'm going to be breaking stuff up. On my Bubblicious box here, the reason that we took the sides down is because there was a direction change. We went from this direction here on the side to this direction here to this direction there. So everywhere there's a direction, I broke it like that. Now these, once it's broken from those sides and it's flat, I don't have to break it from here too. I could, but I don't need to. Okay, I can keep those things connected. The same thing is going to happen on this cap. Here is one direction, this flat plane that's on top. The other direction is going to be going up and down like this. So this will be one piece, this will be another piece. Now it does get a little bit tight in here too because we also have this little cavity, but we'll take care of that as well. So I'm going to go into my side view here. I also hide my thread. I don't want to see that right now. There we go. And I'm going to grab all of these faces right across. So I'm going to switch to my Marquee Tool. I'm going to make sure my tolerance is on, make sure only visible is off, and then drag a box. So now I've selected all of those pieces all the way around this cap. Now I have a bevel on here. If I look at the bevel, I can see that this face is basically facing the same direction. It's not a huge change, it's kind of facing the same direction. Even this one is kind of facing the same direction. That one is more in the upside, okay? Now let's jump to the bottom and take a look at that too. Let me zoom out first. All right, on the bottom here I have 1, 2, 3, it's like 3 different things and then that one. So I may use my select, I won't use that. I will zoom back into here and make a bigger selection. I'm just going to select this, and I'm going to select that. I'm also going to hold Shift and make sure I grab that. There we go. Okay. So now I've grabbed all the pieces for this, all the pieces for that, and then all the way down here, I've grabbed all of these and this one. So if I switch to my 3D view, I don't have anything selected on the very top, and I don't have anything selected on the very bottom. Okay, anything that's facing straight down. So now I need to tell the software, okay, now that I have these faces, I want all of these to be part of one item. And the way we do that is by doing what's called a projection. It's going to basically take that checkerboard and project it a certain way. There's only a few options, and it's very simple to switch through all of them. I'm going to go over here to projection, and you'll see there's 8 options: sphere, cylinder, frontal, flat, shrink, box, cubic 2, and cubic. If you're not sure, you can literally go through one at a time until you find one that seems like it works. Sphere seems like it works, but it's not going to work. Okay. Cylinder is the one I'm going to go with. This is a cylindrical shape, so it makes sense to use that same exact thing. There we go. Now it did stretch it up, so it looks very similar to sphere, but it's not. Here's frontal. That didn't do it. It looks like they're square here, but if I spin around, those are stretched out. Frontal does whatever my camera is looking at. It'll project it straight through the camera. Here's flat. Again, looks like it's good in some spots, but then as I come around, it's not good there. Here's cubic. Okay, we got some weird stuff happening here. Here's cubic 2. Here's box, and here is shrink. Okay, so once you've gone through, you'll kind of know, like, this is what I'm going to need for each one. I know for this, I'm going to need cylinder. Okay, so there's cylinder. It projected it. It puts it all as one piece. Now I'm going to switch to my move tool and just scoot it off to the side. Now, one of the issues with Cinema is that sometimes it does this, where one of these faces just won't be connected. It's not a huge deal. But let's say we wanted a texture to flow nicely from one spot to the next. If that face isn't on the correct side, we could have an issue. So I'm going to click that one face, zoom out, drag it to the other side. And you can see I can just click and drag to move it. And I'm going to get it pretty much placed as good as I can there. We will, yep. So that'll be the next thing. So once it's there, it's not actually connected. I need to connect it, okay? So I'm going to switch to not the faces here, but I'm going to switch to the points. I'm going to go to my marquee. I'm going to grab that whole box area. And then under my UV commands, there's a UV terrace. That will put them together. Also, lineup UV will put them right on top of each other as well, okay? So I'm not sure what terrace means, but that puts them together. Switch back to my move tool, switch back to my faces. And now if I had to double click this, it should select the entire thing. It should be what we ideally want is nice clean edges all the way around. If we have anything funky, then we have some issues. Now we need to get this piece to have the squares that actually look square. So then I'm going to switch over to my relax UV. All of these should be unchecked. I'm going to make sure this says LSCM, and then I'm going to hit apply. And then what that does is it says, okay, now that you have this thing flattened out, I'm going to compare what does the 3D model look like, what do the UVs look like, and I'm going to make sure that the proportions now match. And you'll see here where we have these bevels, these are pretty narrow, we have these longer pieces, we have those tight bevels, and then we have that bigger piece there. So now that matches better to what we had in the 3D world. And you can verify that because everything is square. It's slanted, but it is square. Okay? Now if I go to optimal mapping and I just say apply, realign, oh, it rotated it. Sometimes it'll do that too. One of my pet peeves. I'm just going to rotate this kind of manually about there and then hit align, and then it does a better job. It just didn't know how to align it specifically. Cool. So now those are perfectly straight. These UVs are nice, straight, lined up. This one's a little bit crooked at the end, but that'll be fine. Cool. So that piece is done. Now I would go on to the next piece. So I go to my faces. Now it's going to get a little bit difficult to select stuff because I have so many other things that are kind of in the way of me selecting those pieces. So what I like to do is grab the stuff that is easy to do first, and then come back and just grab the rest and then figure out where they're all going to fit in there. So I'm going to grab this top piece. So I'm going to switch to my top view, make sure I'm in the face mode, make sure I'm on this marquee, and just marquee right in the middle. Then I can middle click back here and then take a look at the bevel, and see that I could probably grab the next one or two out. Instead of me marqueing that again, remember that I have those select grow selection right here, so that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to say UY, that grabs the next one, UY again, that grabs the next one. Now for this projection, remember I had one of those projections that was basically like whatever the camera is looking at, it'll project it straight. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to switch to my top view because that's what it's facing. I'm going to hit frontal, and now we have this nice clean version of the top of that. Now this one typically doesn't have any issues with the pieces being not lined up correctly. Looks like everything's there, so I'm going to move on to the next piece. Now I can grab stuff in here, and that's what I'm going to have to do for the rest of this. So I'm just going to marquee the rest of that, and then middle click in here, and then just look at the stuff that's still here. Okay, so I have this little piece at the bottom, that's still there. I have this piece at the very top, that's still there. And then I also have this band that's going around the side of this. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and say it's not going to be sphere. I've never used sphere. Even on a sphere, I'll use something else. So I'm just going to use cylinder or box. Yeah, box will work. Okay, and you'll see what box does is it did a pretty good job of separating whatever's facing up and down. That's the top of it. That's the bottom of it. It automatically split those pieces. This is the band. Okay, what box does is it takes. Imagine we have our box all put together again. It projects everything facing this direction gets one projection. Everything facing this direction gets another one. Everything facing up and down gets another one. So when we have something that's round, it's doing the same thing. It's saying, okay, all these faces are facing this direction, so it projects there. All these ones are facing this way, it projects there. All these ones are facing that way, and it projects there. So that's a pretty good way to kind of get that set up. You will notice this big circle on the outside. That's not going to be a huge deal. Oh, well, it'll be a huge deal. It will be a huge deal. I don't know why they didn't select. Hold on. So we'll double click that, and then we'll hit box on there. There we go. Cool. Sometimes it does that. We just move with it. Sometimes it's just like nothing. It's like one little bevel on the inside that we're never going to see. Usually that's what it does. So I'm just moving these out of the way for now. And I'm going to marquee this. This should be, I believe, all the top stuff. Yeah, there's nothing on the bottom there. I'm going to put all this together, so I'm just going to do a cylinder on that. And then I'm going to go to relax and say apply. Now it curves it. That's just how it's figuring out that it's going to be, you know, as square as possible. Then I'm going to switch to my scale tool and just scale that down some. Okay, it's a minute piece because it's on the inside, so it's not a huge deal. Now looking at where this item is, this is the cap for one of my pieces. Let's think about where the texturing would happen. So if this is an actual physical piece that in the real world I'm going to put a label on, where typically on this item would I put a label? Around this piece, right? That's one. Where else? right in the top, right? Those two spots are typically them. So those are, in this case, the two most important pieces. So what I want to do is kind of give those the biggest area of this square, okay? The rest of it is probably just going to get a flat color on it. Nothing crazy. It might have a bump, but nothing crazy, okay? So this little band, I'm not too concerned about. He's just going to sit there for a second. This here, if I can grab it, is this bottom band. I don't care about that right now, so I'm just going to set that over there. This right here is the very top. If I move it, it's that piece, so I don't care about that too much. This piece I care about, and that piece I care about, okay? So I'm going to slide these. Let me just double check. That is something. See, this is one of those pieces where it's just like this tiny bit on the bottom. There we go. Let's just switch to our top view, hit frontal. There we go. And I'll just slide him over here. All right. So this piece here, I'm going to double click and slide him into position. This piece here, I'm going to double click and slide this one into position. Now I need to make sure that they fit. One of the things that maybe I can pull that off. I don't want to pull it off. Oh, see, I just ruined it. Go back in there. There we go. And you go back up here. All right. One of the things we have to be concerned about is this gray box that's hard to see on the projector. That's our texture. So everything has to fit inside there. If it's outside of it, the texturing won't work, okay? So whatever we have to fit it inside of that box. Also, we need to make sure that the texture sizes are the same. Look at the size of these squares here, and I'm going to exaggerate this. And now look at the size of the squares there, okay? What eventually is going to happen is we're going to go into Photoshop or Illustrator or InDesign and build a texture for this entire thing. So if I have a piece that's that big and a piece that's that big, what do you think is going to happen if I were to just type a single letter on each one of those pieces? Is one going to be clearer than the other one? Which one's going to be clearer? The larger one, right? Because it's taking up more texture space. That one up there is a smaller piece. It's going to take up less texture space. So we want consistency. So as long as the two pieces have the same size, we're in good shape, okay? So I'm going to scale this down until these are about that size.
Do they need to be lined up too, like with the other surfaces?
No. Okay. Nope. All we care about is that they are squares and they're the same size. There we go. Maybe this one can be a little bit bigger.
Is there any sort of a coordinate somewhere where you'd be able to tell?
Nope. Nope. It's just visual. In some softwares, like Maya is really good where I can grab everything and just say, fit it all to the right size, and it does fit everything to the right dimensions so that they are proportionate, but you get some weird results. If I were to do that, like this piece here, let's just make this huge so we can even see this. All right, so there you can see these tiny squares on there. They're squares, so that would work, but if I were to say, okay, make sure that this is the same size square as this and this, it might take that big piece, because it's one piece, and take up the entire thing while everything else gets shrunk down, okay? So we want to shrink that back to a better size like that. All right, oops, and then move this in. Now, another thing we can kind of consider, we want to optimize this square as best we can. My band that wraps around this thing, that's as big as it can get. If it's any bigger, it's going to go outside of the box. One thing I could do is I could cut it in half, move half of it down, and that will make everything allowed to be a bigger size. Just to show that, let's say I just grabbed all this, and then I moved this down here, move it up here. That was a pretty accurate selection there too. Look at that. And now I would be able to scale everything up at least somewhat. And now I'd be able to fit more texture resolution into each one of those spots. Now the downside of that is, let's say that on that top band, I wanted to have a stripe that went all the way around it. Well, now it's very difficult to do, because now those two pieces, those two ends of where they're going to line up, aren't lined up anymore, okay? So I like to opt for more of a conservative thing like this, and then that gives me more play, right? So now all these other pieces I'm just going to throw into here. Oops. I'm going to try to select them first and then throw them into here and then scale them down. Now I don't care exactly where they're at. I just want to make sure that they're not touching or overlapping anything. I'll also maybe rotate that so he's not in a weird spot. Now, when we get further into 3D stuff, we'll really get into optimizing this even more. And instead of having, let's say, one texture for the cap and one texture for the bottom piece, typically we'll try to combine those. If the bottom fits perfectly in here, I can make one texture that would be for both of those items, okay? And that will basically allow me to make one texture. The computer is calculating one texture versus a texture for the cap and a texture for the bottom. All right, so that's good for now. Let me zoom in just to verify that I'm not touching any of the edges. No, nothing there. And let me go to the other side and verify. No, nothing there. Okay, good. Cool, and that looks like it lines up. If I spin around, I don't see any issues, any weird lines or anything around there. All right, so now that piece is done. Now let me jump to the next piece. So I'm going to hide the cap. I'm not concerned with the threads. They would basically get a flat material anyway, so I don't need to texture it. Anything that I would put a picture on, a texture on, that needs the UVs laid out. So here is not the sweep, here's my subdivision. There it is. And I will hide the threads on this and lay this out. Now the process is exactly the same. Break it down into the essential pieces and then go back and start refining things. All right. So let's go first to, let's say, the cap, because that's very similar to what we had, or the top part. So I'm going to select the top pieces here. And you'll see that I went right to about this one. That one is kind of like an in-between. It could be in the top, it could be in the bottom. I'm going to put it there. The top of this is still selected. That's fine. I'll just get rid of it later. And I'm going to do cylindrical. And then I will, oops, go to the move tool and just shove it off to the side for now. Okay, and this is typically how I do my layouts, is I just like start projecting to break things apart, and then I go back and refine. Okay, so now I'm going to grab the top piece, switch to my top view, and then do a frontal, and then scoot that over. All right, so that gives me this piece, it gives me that piece. I'm going to keep working down the way. I can select stuff in here and then deselect stuff out there. So sometimes that makes it a lot easier. Oops. So if I'm out here, I can just say, let's deselect this. And this. There we go. And deselect that. And now I just have the top selected. And then I'll go back into the top view again and say frontal and move that over. It looks like it's kind of crooked, but I think that'll fix itself. Let's go back into here. I'll marquee all this stuff. I'll deselect the very bottom pieces. And I'm just holding control, oops, to deselect that. There we go. And now for this, we could try cylinder, and sometimes that cylinder will work. But I think in this case, I'd probably just use box or cubic. Well, box seems like it gives us the squares already, so we'll just use that. Okay. Now we did get some extra pieces in here. We'll clean that up afterwards. All right, and then the last bit is the bottom. Now, like I said, it's not really a huge issue for things that we're not going to see. I'm not going to see the bottom, but let's say later down the line, I decide I wanted to use this prop for something else, and I want to have it laying down inside my bathroom. Now I might see the bottom, right? There's this, frontal, there we go. Okay, so now everything is cut out except for this piece. Where'd you come from? Oh, that's the front rim here. Let's just do a box on that. There we go, okay. This is gonna be kind of a weird piece anyway because it's on the inside. All right, so now on this one, where is the texture most likely going to go? The recess, right? So it's a recessed area. Typically you'd find the texture kind of like in those recessed areas. So that's where my main area is. Typically wouldn't have anything up here. Typically wouldn't have anything on the side here, especially if this is like a cologne or something like that, a lotion. Typically all the stuff is right in that main label area. Sometimes it's on the back too, but that's the main part. So this one, I'm just going to make sure that they're square, which they are, and then I'm going to scale it up. And say to about there, okay? Now, if this was something I was going to do anything further with, I'd want to make sure every piece has the same square setup. But with this thing that we're doing, I think it'd be fine just like that. I'm going to grab all these, go to my Relax UVs, hit apply. Why did you just do the one? Or did it not? Oh no, it did all of them, okay. That was the only one that needed it. Let's go to optimal, say realign. And you'll see it puts everything inside here, but it overlapped the one I needed, so I'm just going to scoot these down. That's fine, I'll just scoot that over. I'll scoot this one down here. And I'll just move you up and then rotate you. There we go. Okay. So nothing's overlapping. This one is perfectly inside that box. Good. All right, that should work. Okay. This area here, it's going to be head on in front of the camera. A lot more detail is going to be needed. If I have the net weight information at the bottom, I need to make sure my texture is high enough resolution to hold that information. So it's fine having that one being that big while the other ones are that small. Cool. That should be it on that one. Okay. So let me do a couple more of these just so you can see that process. So I'm going to switch back to my standard view. I'm going to turn off my product 6. And let me turn on product 5. Where are you, product 5? I must have it hidden under here too. Yep. Oh wait, sorry, I'm not finished on that one because I never smoothed it out. Let's jump back real quick. Sorry about that. Here it is. Nope. Product 6, yes. Hide product 5. Bring back product 6. There he is. All right. So I need to apply this subdivision. So now when I do this, you can see the problem. It does that. Now, if I just enable this, hit C on it, now I can manipulate the UVs again. And realistically, all I should have to do is just grab everything now and then say relax. Come on. Relax. You're selected, but you're not selected. Oh, the C didn't work. Let's try that again. Hit C. There we go. Now hit apply. And now they're all back to being squares again. Okay? Now that's why we would do it that way, the lower resolution than the higher one, because it's a lot easier to select. Then we can do our align. Oops. We do our align with this one, and then scale them down, and then fit them into that area. And then I'll grab all the other pieces. I think that's it. Realign this, and then scale them down to fit inside the other areas. Go here. You can go down here. You can go over here and get rotated. And I don't want to make, I do want to make sure that nothing is overlapping, because if I don't, like these pieces here will actually get whatever texture I put on that whole thing. There we go. All right, so now it's really obvious. There's where my texture will go. These are all the other random pieces. All right, so now that piece is done, and now we'll switch back to the other one. All right, so product 6 goes away. Turn off that too. Product 5 I turn back on. Let me go with my other one, not that one. That's 4. Yeah, there we go. Okay, this one I have the same thing. Here's my product, subdivided, here's my cube. So I'm going to turn the subdivision off, jump to my UV edit. You can do all the stuff in that other view. It's just easier to see it when I jump back and forth. So I constantly jump back and forth. The other stuff is still down here at the bottom. That's all the stuff I was looking at before. But again, I like to have it in the other screen. So this one here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to switch to my selection, make sure I'm on faces, grab, in this case I'm going to grab everything, and then just do a cylindrical projection. And then start to grab the stuff that's facing vertical or vertically up and down, and then just project that separately. So now I'm just going to grab this here, come on, that there, and I'll also grab the top. I can do them separately. I'm going to do them together though. And then frontal, and there they are. Okay, now let's look in here because I do have a little bit of a division right in that area. So I'm going to jump back into here. I'm going to try to grab another thing about cinema I don't like is how I can't do the scan outside there. There we go. So I'm just selecting that and then deselecting the stuff that I don't want. Control dragging, deselecting that. All right, that should be good there. And then I'm just going to, let's just do box on this. There we go. And then box gave me the two pieces, the very top of this piece, the very bottom of this piece, and then it broke up that band, just like it did on the other one, okay? It doesn't matter that this is a oblong shape versus the other one, which was a perfect round shape. It's still the same process. This piece will sit over here. This piece will sit over here. These pieces I'm going to grab and just do a cylinder on. And there we go. Okay, now I can grab everything inside here, apply my LSCM. Here's what I was talking about before with it, finding that huge size. Like, look how big it made that piece. It just does that. And then we'll grab everything and we'll optimize it. There we go. Okay. So the first step, cut it all up. Second step, do your, all right, so the first thing we did was projected all the stuff around there just to cut it all up into pieces, made sure everything was flat, then we relaxed it, then we optimized it, and now our last step is just to make it look the way we want it to look when we go into Photoshop. So I'm going to take, let's say, this piece here. I don't want to move it yet. I forgot. I still have that. Subdivision surface. So let's hit C on that. Let's bake it. There we go. Hit C. And now we'll grab all this again and then relax it. There we go. And then we will optimize it. There we go. Now it did do something weird right there. Let's figure out what happened. All right, so it did break up this piece. Sometimes it will do that. Not a huge deal. Double clicking, it's easy to select. These were the pieces that went into that. So I just reproject it. Re-cylinder map. Scoot it over to the side for a second. It did break off some of these side pieces, so I will grab those. Move them to the other side. And there's no, you don't see a move tool, it's just there. You're just moving stuff. Then I'll grab the points and then do the UV commands, terrace. I should be able to grab actually this whole side and do that whole side. That seemed to work. All right, so now we have that. Let's double check the bottom. Yep, that's still good. All right, and this is the top. There it goes. Yep, that still works. Cool. All right, so now let's do that again. Let's grab all the pieces, relax, do that. Optimal. Sorry, I have to be in faces. UV, nope, relax, apply. optimal apply. There we go. Okay, now we do have some extra pieces at the bottom. Let's just double check that these don't belong anywhere. All right, that's where they belong, is right here on this piece, so that's not a huge deal. I'm not concerned about that too much. There's also a couple pieces here. Oops, and those ones are important, right, because those are right there. And they just slipped out of that area. So when I did that terrace on the other one, it just didn't seem to connect in. So I think these are where this goes. Let me click here. Nope, I switched them. This goes up here. And this is what some people like about UVs, because it's kind of like putting together a puzzle. And so if you have the patience for putting together a puzzle, some people like that. All right, let's grab this. UV, terrace. There we go. It looks like they connected. Grab these. Terrace. Looks like they connected. Okay. Cool. Cool. All right, so that's everything there. This is everything here. Good. All right. So that piece is done for now. Other things to consider, right? We may put a texture on top. So there's the top piece. There's where I put my main texture. I may put a texture on here. Probably wouldn't put anything on the bottom, again, unless it's like upside down or something. And then these are all just like the bands and things that I wouldn't have anything on anyway. Another thing that we do need to consider, when I take this from 3D into Photoshop, what direction are all these things facing? Like if I were to take this and if I were to rotate it like that, we have no idea what's the top and what's the bottom, right? So I'm actually going to switch my texture. And this is something that, oops, I don't need a new texture. This is something that the more UV layouts you do, the more tools you kind of get with your stuff. So I'm going to load an image. It's going to be UV. I thought I had it in. There it is, UV grid. And then what this looks like is a checkerboard, but it's blue or yellow, green, and red. That way I can see red and green should always be on the top, and then blue and yellow should always be on the bottom. So if I were to look at my item here, and I see that, okay, here's red and green, here's yellow and blue, but they're swapped, right? So blue is on the right, yellow is on that side. Let's see the other side if it's the same thing. Blue, yellow, green. Okay, that's right. Yep, so that's good there. And then this one, blue is on the that side, and then yellow, so that should be good. Okay. If it was swapped, I would need to rotate that around 180 degrees, whatever it is, to get it lined up correctly. I can also zoom in, it's hard to see, and hit Control-R. It'll show me the numbers on there, so I can verify this is facing up and down. Control-R here, again, numbers are facing up and down. It's important because when we go into Photoshop, we build this texture, we come back in here, the texture might be flipped a different way. We want to make sure it's not, okay? All right, back to UV Edit, and I'm just going to switch these. The top should be on the top, so I'm going to put this on the top. And this is the bottom, so that should be down here. Let me move these pieces out of the way. That's going to bother me. And I'm toggling between the Move tool and the Selection tool by just tapping the space bar. So when I marquee something, I want to be in that other tool. When I double click, I want to be in the Move tool. This is the bottom, so you will rotate. And then you will get stuffed over here. All right, that's good. Good. Nothing's overlapping. Everything fits. Perfect. Okay. So you do the same process to every single item. If it's square, you do it. If it's round, you do it. If it's oblong, you do it. If it's some kind of weird funky shape, you do it. If it's something where it doesn't have a texture, you don't have to be too concerned about getting the UVs exact. On this thing here, I don't care what the texture looks like back here because I'm not really laying it out. In this, I lay out the entire thing because I may use it later and I want to have it all set up. But for you, you really only need to focus on what is actually getting the texture, okay? So let me show one more where I'm only concerned about just the texture. So that's 5, 4 is what I just did. That's 3 is that one. Okay, so here is number 3. I'm going to only be concerned with, actually, let me go to the other one. That squiggly one at the top, this one. There we go. This one has a distinct area of where I would put the texture. Okay, again, just in that label area right in the middle. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to my cube, turn this off, go to my UVs, and I'm going to grab the entire thing, go to my projection, and just do, it doesn't matter, frontal, and stick everything down there. Okay, so the entire thing is down there. I don't care about any of the UVs or any of the texture except that area where I'm going to put the label. Now I'm going to go into this thing and grab just these faces, because those faces are the only ones I care about for that texture. There's a little bit of a bevel on this, I believe. Yes, no? Oops, wrong one. Let's hit UI. Nope, there wasn't. I thought I had a bevel on there, but I must have deleted it. All right. So I grabbed that. I'm going to switch to my front view and just hit frontal. And there it is. I have squares on here. That looks beautiful. I can scale this up to an enormous size like that. I will then go in and subdivide it. I will hit C on my subdivision. Notice it's still selected. Notice how it's shrunk inward because I smoothed it out, so I've lost some of those divisions. So that's where I'll use my UI once I switch. It's not letting me grab those other ones. Let's try this again. Let's grab this whole thing. And sometimes it just gets stuck, so I'm just going to grab the whole thing and frontal it again, throw it down there, and then grab these again. No, I'm not going to do that. That's going to take too long. It's going to be too much time. How can I grab those? Oh, I know what to do. I'll go on here. Select loop. I can't grab loops. All right. I'm going to do a little trickery. I'm going to grab the actual polygon faces, use my select loop, and grab these outward. Okay, that's where my label would go. Now, these are not the same thing. But if I go to frontal, I believe, yep, there we go, it broke them off, okay? So I can still grab regular faces, do the frontal, it'll break them off. And now with those separated from the other ones, switch to my texture ones, now I can grab all of these and then do a new frontal on them, and then we should be in good shape. There we go, new frontal, perfect. And then you get scaled up. And it looks like something is in the back. Yep, I've accidentally grabbed the back pieces too, so we will just double click. I will zoom in. Oh, I got it. There we go. Just grab this, grab this. And I just keep projecting into that frontal just to keep them all together. There we go. All right, so that's all I'm concerned about with this one is getting that label locked in. Perfect, it works. Back to my startup. Make sure this renders so I can see it. Yep, it's facing the correct direction, the correct letters, all that. Okay, cool. So I have these things laid out. If I switch to my other one, the other version I have, which is under Window, which is under 001, every one of my items is on a separate layer. And every one of my items has their own UVs all laid out all over the place. Here's one again. I was only concerned about that area. So that's what the UVs look like on this. Same thing on that wavy bottle. The UVs on the other area would have been like crazy all over the place. There's that one, there's this one, and so on. Okay. So once I have all my UVs laid out, my next step is to take this into Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, wherever, and build my texture. So I'm going to jump over to, or I'm going to jump down here. This is body lotion, replace the material on here. There it is. And I'm going to go to UV edit. I'm going to make a material for this that shows me exactly where all these lines are at. I bring that into Photoshop and I can paste or paint right on it. So I'm going to make a new texture. I'm going to call this what it is, body lotion underscore UV. The resolution should be 4096 by 4096. That's the highest we want to go. Any bigger, it's going to take a lot longer to do any rendering that we do, especially the more items we have, the longer it's going to take. What's that? Yep, the width and the height. Oh, oops, thank you. 4096. Resolution doesn't matter, that's fine. We wanted RGB, 8 bits is fine. My color here is just the base color. You can throw this onto whatever you want. Make it black, it doesn't matter. All right, so now it's black. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my brush. I don't think you can see it. No, you can't. So on this side of the screen, there's this paintbrush right here. I'm going to switch to that just so I can set up the paintbrush. So my size for this is going to be about 10 pixels, and that should be good. Generic filters, yes. Okay, yep, just making sure that I have just that. All right. My colors are down here, so if I need to change my color, I can click this. Oops, there it is. Everything on my screen is shrunk, so I can't see the stuff. And I can change the color of the brush. Now this will be whatever color the wireframe is. Typically what happens is if you have a black background and a black brush, you don't see it. So obviously you need to have black brush, white background, or white brush, black background, just to make sure you have contrast. All right. So I'm going to grab my faces. Oops, my marqueeing ones. There we go. I only care about these, but I'm just going to grab everything because I may want to use those later. And I'm going to go up to Layer, and I'm going to say Outline Polygons. And what that does is it takes that brush size, whatever I've set it to, and it outlines each one of those UVs. So now I'll have a texture that I can bring in and know exactly where things are lining up. If I have the brush size too big, it would be a big blob. If the brush size is too small, I may not be able to see it. So 10 I found was a good number. So I'm going to save my texture as a TIFF. Body lotion UV, I already set it. I put it inside my textures folder. And oh, I do have Illustrator open. There it is. And now I'm going to build my texture. Okay, so if I go into Illustrator and make a 4096 pixel by 4096 pixel document, I turn off the transparency grid. Oh, that's a different button every time. Hi, transparency grid. There we go. I'm just going to place my body lotion UV in here. There it is. And then line it up right with that corner. My picture is 4096, my document's 4096, everything should line up. Now I make a new layer, lock this one, and I build my texture into this. Whatever I want it to look like. If I'm doing this planters thing, I would draw out the nutritional information on the side, I would draw out all this stuff here, I would draw out all that stuff there. Keeping in mind that this thing is flat and it's going to wrap around. So where it wraps around is not represented here because it's flat. So you would have to just know in the software, I have about 20 divisions right here in the middle, that's where my texture is going to go. Okay? Or wherever we have a cut line here and it's going to fold around, that's where that's going to be. So I'm going to switch over to this one because I actually have stuff here. And turn this off. Turn. Oh, that's the wrong one. There it is. All right, so here is the UV layout for the previous one that I had. You can see exactly where the bars are right there. I didn't care about the other stuff, so I didn't put the other UVs inside here. And I just went in and drew it. If you go in Photoshop, it's the same process. You make a 4096 pixel document, drop your image in there, and then you just start creating your stuff on top of it. I prefer Illustrator. I can scale things up and down without losing resolution, so that's what I use. The first thing I did was just created a product line. So mine is 3D Digital Bath Products. Created a little logo, kept it simple. little thing here, and then I have the net weight in the milliliters. Once I have all this stuff saved, created, they're all on different layers. I just turn off the wireframe so I don't see it. I turn on this background color. That will be the color of my item. And then I export it. If you've never exported from Illustrator, it's just exporting as. Which one is this? Round bottle. So I'm going to call this round bottle texture. You can save it as a ping. You can save it as a TIFF. Either one is fine. Don't save them as JPEGs. You lose quality every time you do. So a ping or a TIFF is typically good. I'm going to save mine as a ping just to save space. You want to also make sure you're using your artboard, and make sure you only have one artboard. If you have multiple, you can pick the specific one. And there's a preview of it. I don't need to worry about transparency because there's no transparency, and I hit OK. Now when I jump into here, switch back to my standard view. That was not body lotion, that was which one? Round bottle. So I will turn off body lotion, turn on round bottle. There he is. So I'm dropping the material on here, and then I'm just going to pick that round bottle texture. And Illustrator likes to name them 01, then when you save it again, 001 or 0101. It's weird. There it is. And so now it lines up. If I missed something up or the logo was too small or something wasn't perfect, jump back in Illustrator, I fix it, and I save it, bring it back into here. And there it is. The textures aren't set up yet. It's just kind of, or the material isn't set up yet, so the reflections, specularity, all that aren't done. This is just placeholder. This is getting us to the next stage, okay? So for each one of your products, if you have a consistent design, it's easy to go from one to the next to the next. Now that was an hour of demonstration to get to just the UV part done. I spent a couple hours yesterday just going through each one of them, making sure my UVs were good. Personally, I don't care for Cinema's UV layout. Maya has, I think, a better setup, but we're using what we're using. For my cap, if I'm not doing anything with the cap, I can just drop a material on here and then just give this a name. Obviously, we want to call these things something, and just call it cap for now. All my caps, I can just, no UV layout, just drop a texture on them if they're just going to be flat, no pictures. Anything that has a picture, a texture, something like this, has to have a UV layout on it. Some things you can get away with. If I'm doing this thing here, I could have modeled this entire container and then made a new plane that would sit right here in the front as a separate piece, right? This thing here is actually, the label is printed right on the bottle versus something that would have a label wrapped around it. Something like this, two different materials, this plastic is one material, this label is something else. So if I'm doing the label, I could have modeled a cylinder really close to the edge of that and then just UV laid the, that part out. More stuff you'll play with, okay? Here's what my other textures look like. So I have, this one is for that bottle. This one, oh, there it is, is for another bottle. And this is really tiny. This is my little UFO bottle that I have here. I'm not going to use the UFO bottle. I really don't care for the UFO bottle. But there's where that one is. It's just going to lay right there, or right here. So it's really tiny, so it's not a whole lot of room. Let me open up the one that I actually have other stuff on. Product 002. That one. And I will jump out of my camera. And I will get closer to my items. Okay. So there's all the stuff that I currently have, and it's the same process. I'm just duplicating my layers. moving stuff around. So I went in here for the next one, and I just duplicated this setup, turned the next UV set on. Yes, I know. There we go. So this is the one I just duplicated. I hide my background color, and then I can just grab all of my assets and then slide it down here. This is oval bottle, which is my bottle right here. I can see I'm going to have a lot of divisions in the middle, a lot of divisions in the back. The sides are going to be where it's shorter. So if I just kind of line it up right here, I can adjust it afterwards. Okay. My net weight stuff will go at the bottom. I didn't even update all my net weights and all my stuff. They're all just exactly the same. And push that there. Give this a new name. There we go. Hide my wireframe, turn my background back on. Control K is the hotkey for that. Oval bottle. Use my artboards, export. Okay. If you don't use your artboards, it'll actually export whatever size this is. So if something is like sticking out like that, it'll export it with that in there. Okay. Or if you didn't use the entire screen like this, it'll actually export just the stuff that's in the screen. So you want to make sure you have that button checked. I already made my materials down here, so I'm just grabbing it and then replacing that. And that's the wrong one. That's the texture, or the UVs, oval bottle. There it is. And you'll see what I did here. Obviously, I put it on the back, or on the side. So then I just jump back to Illustrator, lock the background here so I don't move it, and just grab the stuff, slide it over, save it, bring it back in. I could go through, and I've done this before on other projects. You can actually see where it's at. You can see where these are tighter here, and this is more open. If I go back to the other screen, and I look at the UVs for that item, or the divisions, you'll see here, these are really open, these are a bit tighter. So that's a kind of indicator. Sometimes I will go through and actually count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that way I know I have 5 divisions to kind of put it right there in the middle. Further into 3D, you'll get into different tricks and things you can do, but for now, that's the quickest way to be able to do that kind of stuff. So turn that off, turn this back on, Control K again, oval bottle right here. And I should have called that texture just like all the other ones. Use my artboard and go. Then I go back to my oval, go back to the dots, go back to oval bottle texture. That didn't do anything. And there it is. If I need to tweak it more, I can tweak it more. I could also go into my UVs, but I really want to avoid that and tweak it. If it's something simple, I could just move the UVs over a little bit, but I really avoid doing that if I can. Oh, I didn't turn that one on to render. There you go.
So we're not rendering them out like in Cinema. Aren't we bringing them into KeyShot?
Yes, we're going to do them in KeyShot, but we still need to make sure all the stuff is set up inside here.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
Even like lighting and that type of thing?
No, just the objects. We're going to go through the lighting process so you can see the lighting inside of Cinema. I believe I do have you render it out in Cinema and in there just so you can see the difference. Because a lot of this is, why would we use KeyShot? Why would we use something else? How can we simulate this stuff inside of Cinema if we don't have KeyShot, right? Cool. So that's the process for this. Every object you do, same thing over and over and over again. Once you really get into using this kind of stuff and understanding how UVs work, everything else in 3D is a lot simpler. Modeling becomes a lot simpler because you understand UV layout. And then you can start getting into other things, which is like this, substance. which allows you to make these like really cool textures on things. You can't do this unless you have the UVs laid out correctly. All of those are pictures of rust and metal and whatever else to make them look correct. Same thing here. Same thing there. Some materials. Like all of that stuff. That works because the UVs are laid out. The UVs aren't laid out, it don't work. They actually released a new version of Substance, which is a lot easier to kind of make your own stuff too, which is really cool. All right. Awesome. Questions? No.